Welcome to the Natural Genius podcast. We're here to help you tap into your natural genius. Let's go. One of the things I love about Natural Genius is that it's showcasing people's multidimensionality. Joanne is an absolute inspiration in this respect. She's lived in many countries, grown her career through many different business areas, is an expert on leadership and management, is a great vocalist, a musician, an amazing wife and friend. I'm so looking forward to hearing what's news with Joanne. Enjoy hearing from her.
It's
Jojo,
okay.
welcome to the Natural Genius podcast. It's so
Thank
lovely to
you.
have one of my dear friends on this show. You are divine and so special to me. Yeah, it's amazing that you're here.
It's an absolute pleasure to be here, Sam. And I'm getting emotional as well. Friendships, I was thinking about it this morning as I was, mentally getting ready for today. And we've been friends for 25 years. It's like
Yeah.
almost half my life. It's like, oh my gosh, we're so blessed. So blessed. It's lovely to be here. And with you, as always.
And fun to sort of think about the two of us in the Deloitte offices years gone by. It's such a wild experience, isn't it, to know friends over many years. It's a real privilege and there's so many gems that can come from knowing someone for a long time because they get to know your personality. You have developed over the years and studied so hard and lived in different countries. Tell me
Yeah.
about the tips that you pass on in that realm around management and leadership.
The main one, which is kind of the mainstay, and probably the reason that I did write the book, which I know we'll talk about, Game On as Management, Your Best Career Play, is to be a little bit more proactive in your decision-making process of actually deciding to be a manager, right? You and I have both been managers in our careers, Sam, and I don't know about you, but I know I definitely fell into the role without realizing personally all of the potential challenges, even when I'm teaching, the skills of being a manager and being a great leader. When you're actually put in that situation yourself, you're kind of like, wow, this is new. Because everybody that we're managing is different, and we might even be different people at different times during our careers as well that we're working with. So I think in order to answer your question, to develop an increased sense of self-awareness and be curious about your own personal management style, and in that, be open to learning about what it really takes to be a great manager. And I think finally, to recognize that management is about the impact that you have on other people, and the impact that we have as managers, or basically as human beings, is everything to me. So to open your eyes, your ears, your any any kind of self-awareness to understanding that and being curious about it, and also being accountable for the impact that we have on other people, is a mainstay, I think, and something that a lot of would-be managers probably don't really think about before diving into the role.
Because people are at work for many hours of many weeks in the year.
Well, yeah, if you think about it, we spend more time with our work colleagues than we do in a day, often than many of us do with our home colleagues or in our home life, especially, you and I. That's why I think that the relationships that we create at work are life relationships. They're life friendships, arguably. I know at the moment I spend more time at work, 9-10 hours a day than I do definitely with my husband and puppy dog, so the relationships that I have there are incredibly important to not only my psychological well-being, but no doubt theirs. So
Mm,
for me, it's a completely different lens to look at life through, and
mm.
at our work life through as well. That whole rubbish of work life balance, I can't tell you. It's just like really, it's like this. It's just life, and that's why I think that what we do for work is life and
Mm.
should be seen that way because it's just so important for us as human beings and individuals, and so important for the people that we work with and their
Yeah.
lives, right? Because we're all human at the end of the
Yeah.
day.
And
Yeah.
Jojo, tell me, you've recently fallen into a bigger management role as well. Is that right at the hospital?
Well, I've started to work as a business partner. I've been in leadership and learning and development my whole, you know, most of my adult life career anyway.
Mm, mm.
So for the last 25, 30 years, and worked with a lot of amazing business partners. And to find myself in a strictly business partner type role within a healthcare or hospital environment has been absolutely fascinating. I
Wow.
can see why there's shows like Grey's Anatomy and The Pit and all of those wonderful shows based on what happens within a hospital environment because, it really is seeing people at their, the patients, obviously, at some of their most challenging times, some of their most wonderful times. We have a birth center in the hospital and hear the chime go through the hospital every time a new baby or a new life comes into this world, which
Oh,
just gives you just one of those wonderful feelings. Um, and I have just such an enormous respect for anybody who works in the healthcare industry, full stop, right? I mean, what they do and how they do it is absolutely astounding. So to be a little bit closer to how individuals lead under those circumstances is an honor and a privilege and an opportunity to impact hopefully not only them in their careers, but obviously the people that they impact, and to be a little bit closer to the C-suite and the challenges of what it takes to actually run a hospital has been an absolute gift to me as well. I'm just learning so much every day, and a privilege to have the human beings in my life that I
mm.
I I have, particularly in this new field. That I'm working in. Yeah, as you know, Sam, I work in a small town too, so it's here in the Pacific Northwest of Washington. So it's interesting to be part of a community now that people really care about their health and the health care that is provided to them, and to be part of that for the final years of my career is an honor. I'm really enjoying it. So.
Oh, wow, Joe. And
Mm.
it reminded me of your facilitation years at Deloitte and how you
I
helped so many leaders improve and managers improve. And
mm,
the many, many, many courses that you ran. And it also
mm.
reminds me of you being a musician and a beautiful singer.
Well, I
So
did bring singing into my facilitation set. You
you did
Jeez.
that's right.
I did. I'll never forget. When I was working at Amazon. I wanted to make a link between doing what you love and loving what you do, even if what you love is not necessarily something that you can make a lot of money from. But how do you kind of link those two things together? So I was at Amazon and I was delivering a final keynote, if you like, to about 120 leaders. And I wanted to make that point. So um, I remember like they'd had the head of HR and there was the head of devices and there was all of these really important people in the room. And they'd been there for about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. And then I got up. So I started singing from the back of the room into the microphone, one of the very first songs that I ever sang live when I was 5 years old. And I'm not going to sing it now because my voice is
There
going
was a
to
little
get.
part of me that was like so hopeful and so
No,
believing
right,
that you were going to.
right. Oh my gosh, I don't. It's when the red, red robin comes bopping along, So here I am,
when you
singing.
were 5.
I was singing that, 5-year-old Johnny
Oh,
Young's
yes,
talent team. Do you remember that in
I
Melbourne?
certainly
Yes,
do.
I auditioned and went to training there. And that was one of the first songs that I ever sang live. I wish in those days we had a recording of that, that I
Oh,
could
please.
remember. So I know that song is now in everyone's mind that is listening to this. But it was a fun kind of song. But, and to be in that kind of audience singing that into a microphone or as I was walking to the front of the stage, I do remember one of the leaders grabbing up their phones and starting to make a recording, and he had this huge grin on his face because, who does that? who starts who starts a conversation around career development by singing a song that they sang when they were 5? I mean, it definitely got everybody's attention. It possibly, woke people up as well. I don't know. But then obviously I needed to bring it home, and I brought it home by, talking about the importance of doing what you love and loving what you do. And I've sung all my life, as you know, like my first band was called Night Hours. One of my last bands here in the States was the Bipolar Bears. I was sang in a band when I lived in Hong Kong there for a bit. They were the Jimmy Two Times, so there's or Jimmy Two Times. So yeah, had a lot of experience and I had a lot of fun. And where I can break into song when I'm facilitating training, I do, because it's, any kind of music is a memory making machine, I think, and to create memories with emotion through music was one of the unique elements that I tried to bring to the experience that I was creating for the people that I was, educating in the room. And I think, I do recall going up an elevator once when I worked at Amazon, and one of my participants was in the elevator with me, and she did comment to one of her colleagues at the time, "Oh, that's the singing facilitator that I told you about," so
The
it
singing
was,
facilitator. And
yeah, it
I'm
was kind of
sure that
fun.
in different moments in facilitation, you want to bring different energy into the room. So the
Mhm.
atmosphere possibly was uplifted as well, Jojo.
Think so. It definitely wasn't expected, right? It definitely created a memory maybe for people that I had, and that was the impact that I wanted to have
Mm,
on those people, and to create something that was fun as well. So, and I was, appreciative of my leadership at the time that let me bring an element of my unique self into the classroom as well, So, I mean, who doesn't love music, Sam? Like, really, at the end of the day, I was never going to be the next, Taylor Swift, right, in Australia growing up as a singer. I did have a manager when I was a singer, when I was about 17 or 18. I did take it quite seriously, but, clearly that was not the future that was meant for me. My auntie, people would maybe, if they've been around a while listening to the podcast, my auntie was Lorraine Davey, and folks could Google her, and she was really quite famous in her day. Now, my voice was nowhere near as wonderful as her. I was nowhere near as talented, but she was my mum's older sister, and she was really quite wonderful. She was on the front page of the TV Week. If people from Australia are listening, and they would remember that magazine from 40 years ago. She was on the front page, I think, when she had given birth to her first daughter. So there you go.
oh my goodness, I love these flashbacks. Tell me, was Mum a good singer
Hmm.
as well?
Mum wanted to be a good singer,
Oh, you're
but
so diplomatic.
Mum was fun. It's funny. I think she wanted it more than
Oh,
more than
bless.
her older sister did, but Mum just didn't quite have the talent. Unfortunately, that didn't stop her singing in the house from time to time. By the way, but
I was imagining,
she
I love this.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, mum really wanted to do the singing and the dancing and all that kind of
Oh,
stuff. But I think she was destined for other things. First
you
of all, to be my
mentioned,
mum.
yeah, that's what was going through my mind. Tell
Yeah.
me, you used the word impact before, and I would
Mm,
love to hear any stories you've got about the impact that has delighted you in some of the transformations you've seen in managers or leaders through
mm.
your career, or even just people that you observed. I feel, I mean, it's just in my life, it's just so special to see somebody do what they love and surprise others with what they can achieve, and whether they're going after it or not, or whether they're just quietly transforming.
Yeah, it's an interesting word, isn't it? Impact. It's not. It's there's definitely a separation in my mind between, or there can be, between the intention of the behaviors that we engage in and the actual impact that those behaviors are having on others. And, obviously, in order sometimes to find out that maybe our impact was not what we intended, can be really quite a surprise to folks. And I mean, if you think about it, that's the feedback loop, right? That's how we grow and learn as human beings. I think that people need to own the impact that they have, irrespective of the intention that
Mm,
they do have on people. I do believe that if you think about the legacy that we all want to lead or leave in our lives, I would imagine that there is definitely a relationship between the impact that we have on other people and the
mm,
legacy that we
mm,
leave. Like, what do people think of when they think about Samantha Bell, right? Or what do people think of when they think about Joanne Merrick? We
mm,
want to leave, we want other people to think well of us. And for
mm,
me, that is the impact that we have had on them. Like, everybody listening to this podcast is going to be impacted in some way, I would think, right?
mm,
Hopefully, and hopefully that impact that we're having on them is what's intended. Maybe it's not. I don't know. But I had a very special friend in my life. People come into our lives, you obviously being one of them for me. But when I was living in Hong Kong, I met a gentleman by the name of Sander Dales. And it was interesting because I just moved to Hong Kong from Melbourne to start a new role as, head of learning and development for Asia Pac for Juniper Networks. I didn't know anybody when I moved to Hong Kong. And Sander was a fellow Kiwi. He's a New Zealand guy. And he was moving there with his wife and children. And as you do when you start a new role, you get to know all of the leaders. And so I was having different meetings with different leaders of different departments. And every one of those leaders were like, you need to meet this Sandra Dales guy. You need to meet this Sandra Dales. And what's so special about this Sandra Dales person? Like, I don't know. Well, okay. He wasn't around. He was traveling somewhere at the time. But I eventually got to meet Sandra, and I could see the specialness that they were talking about. Sandra was one of the most generous, thoughtful, funny human beings who had a unique way of bringing people together. And I don't think that I would have been as successful in my role and eventually moved with Juniper to Hong Kong, from Hong Kong to the United States, if it wasn't for him and his impact on me and my career. I just don't. I mean, he was so, um, he had a unique way of bringing people together that impacted them in the most positive of ways. And I could see it permeating through the similarity, permeating through all of the relationships that he had. Anyway, not long after I moved to the United States, he moved back to New Zealand. And unfortunately, I heard by way of a phone call just after Christmas a couple of years ago that Sanda had passed away. And suddenly he was mowing the lawn. He wasn't even 50 years old, and he keeled over and died. And I still remember the emotions that I felt at that time. It felt, and I actually, it was a gut punch. It was an emotion that I'd never experienced before in my life. And this was the fifth person that had passed away for me in the previous kind of 18 months, 2 years, all of whom were very close to me, not just my parents, but for other people that I had worked with. So I jumped on a plane the next day and went to New Zealand to be with his family. And I ended up being in New Zealand for about 4 weeks to close out things with them that I felt like I needed to do for him and my love for him. And Sammy, I'll never forget being at his funeral. And I swear he whispered, I heard this voice in my ear, impact is everything. And that's why I wrote that I linked that to not only him personally, but also the impact that he had had on my life, and also the impact that he had had on so many others' lives. And he was one of the mainstays of any time I had a gig in Hong Kong, he was there shouting and cheering me on from the back. And from a professional perspective too, he was in every single class that I ran with him and his team on management and leadership development, cheering me on from the sidelines, from a career development perspective as well. So I needed to give him homage in the book, and it was him that really provided these words of impact is everything. I literally heard them at his funeral. I heard them coming out of his mouth, so to speak, whispered in my ear. So impact is everything. And I think managers and leaders have such a profound opportunity to impact people's lives in the most positive of ways and or the most negative of ways. And I've seen both. And I think that's one of the reasons that I finished the book. I'd started the book well before meeting Sandra, but I definitely wanted to finish the book because I knew that people needed to make more conscious decisions to either get into management roles or not. And whichever way they decided to go was right for them, but was ultimately important because of the either positive or negative impact they could potentially have on other people. So that's one of the mainstay of things that I talk to potential new managers about, that they need to be more aware of. You're going to impact people in your management and leadership career, whether you want to or not. So you need to think about it before you even decide to jump into that role. And I think it's one of the most important things, as well as, all of the other many and varied skills that go into being great leaders or great managers. And I came up with about 22 of them. So there's a lot. And I think for managers and leaders or individual contributors thinking about a journey into a management role, to think about all of the skills that they need to create, which is so different from that of an individual contributor. I did a LinkedIn post today actually along the lines of it's not just going to a new level in a game. It's actually a completely new game that you are taking on in taking on a management role. And I don't think a lot of people realize that as much as they should. So they're the couple of things that I talk about to get people really start thinking along the right lines of, is this something that they want to do or not?
Jojo, when you're talking about Sunda, and I feel so blessed to hear more of that story. And when you're talking about him, it sounds like there's integrity and gentlemanly aspects that he was known for. I was talking to someone recently, and they were a facilitator struggling to make sure that the executive were turning up for workshops to lead their people. And it was such a disappointment that there was that angst around it. And it sounds like Sunder was just rock solid, just could always be relied upon. And in life and in business, that's very cool to be around. And it's also less noise because you just know you don't have to do extra emailing, extra checks. You just know that they're going to be there.
Yeah, and I think no matter what level of management you are at either, whether you're leading a management team, you've always got something to learn. And I think visibility is really important as well. That was one of the very special things that we had at Deloitte to a certain degree, but definitely at Juniper, was pretty much every training program I ran. I was there for 7 years, doing a lot of training in a lot of different content. The managers or leaders were always in the room. And that they would tell me afterwards that they learned so much from the experience, even though, they already knew how to give feedback, or they already knew how to have difficult conversations, or they might have, already have known, whatever it was about the content, how to facilitate meetings, or, whatever the content we were doing. But they always learned something. And that is, to me, another important skill of being a great manager, is to continue with that humility, and knowing that no matter how well-rounded you are, because your skills are so important as a manager, as we've already talked about, you need to still be open to learning more, and particularly learning more from your team. That they would often learn things, personal and professional things about their teams, and we'd enter into some really interesting conversations, as I'm sure you have as well, the programs that you have run. You can never anticipate what's going to come up because it's people and they're human. So I always found that their presence was appreciated and acknowledged by their team, because it was basically telling their team how important the learning of these skills were, no matter what level of the organization you were at. I've always been frustrated, as that I think there's a lot of companies that throw people into management roles without necessarily giving them the skills and the competencies that they need in order to be successful. There's a lot of companies that don't do that, but there's also a lot of companies that do, that take it, very seriously. And obviously, you and I have always strived to work with and for those kinds of organizations as well. So.
And that's what struck me when you were talking about the hospital and your role at the moment, Jojo, that you always are learning, always curious. So it puts you in good stead to be expanding your knowledge, expanding your awareness. I think that's
especially especially in the healthcare industry. I think there's a lot of opportunity. We've got great nurses and great doctors, but these kinds of human type skills are not maybe as taught as readily as the important, competency or capability related skills that are strictly as for their roles. So that's why I think it's definitely a blessing to be able to be in that.
I was going to ask you about what you've observed having lived in different countries other than the one you were born in. I also want to expand that question around different places that you've worked, because you just had me remember Deloitte days and thinking about the difference between that or Amazon or Juniper or other places that you've worked and where you're working now in a different industry. So do you want to talk to countries or workplaces? Tell me some more.
Sure. Yeah, well, it is interesting, isn't it? It's funny, Sam. Where do these thoughts come from as it relates to your career, right? I mean, we've all had career guidance, career counseling, all that kind of stuff. Maybe it starts in high school or whatever, I don't know. But eventually we have an inkling as to which direction we might want to go. And some of us might go down and get a degree or get some qualifications in that area and then find out that maybe that's not what we want to do. And that's fine too, because I think at the end of the day, it all comes together quite miraculously. So anyway, yes. So I woke up one morning when I was about 18, 19 years old, and the thought came into my head that one day I wanted to live and work in a country where English was not the first spoken language. Right? I have no idea where that came from because, I'd lived in Australia my whole life. I had traveled a little bit, but not that much. I've only ever learned one language, and that being, English Australian, right? So I don't know where this came from.
English Australian.
So yeah, but I always had this in the back of my mind, and 40 years or 30 years later, or actually, no, probably 20 years later after that thought, I find myself in an opportunity to move to Hong Kong and live and work there. And I'd never been to Hong Kong in my life. I'd worked, I'd never, I'll backtrack from that. I had been to Hong Kong for work with Deloitte. But as far as what it meant to live there, I had no idea. I didn't know anybody there at the time. But I wanted to live and work in a country where English was not the first spoken language. So it was about as different culturally from Australia as I think I could possibly get to. The language is extremely complicated. But I thought, why not? So I think from, that experience, one of the main realizations, there's actually two. One is that people are people, and while the people in Australia that I had met up until that point in time were the most important and significant in my life, the people that I was going to meet in Hong Kong, now looking back, Sanda being one of them, was another one of the most significant changes in my life as well. And people, for me, are a gift. Even if for some of the most challenging relationships that I might have had in my life, looking back on those relationships, for good, for bad, or indifferent, have been an absolute gift because they've made me the person that I am today, and more appreciative now for the people that I have in my life today. No matter how long I've known them, like people like yourself, obviously, for over 25 years or something, which still blows my mind because I never thought I would get that old. So I think the gift of people has been one of the most interesting elements of living and working in another country. And I think the other thing that I learned is the importance of communication. My actual integration from Melbourne to Hong Kong was actually a lot less challenging, surprisingly, than my integration from Hong Kong to the United States. I found the culture and the similarities in the culture from moving from Melbourne to Hong Kong was, I don't know. I mean, it's a completely different culture. I don't know why I'm thinking that way, but the cultural challenge between Australia and the United States was a lot more challenging and difficult for me than the cultural shift between Melbourne and even though we spoke the same, arguably they speak English in America. I say that because there's so many Americans that don't understand some of what I'm saying, but I make fun of it and they love it. Like every American I've met pretty much has been fascinated by Australia and Australians. So that's an absolute gift. So I've always got that as a mainstay. You know, even when I start up, I start our orientation program here in the States for, you know, new hires coming into the hospital. And we give them a gift on day one of a food voucher. You know, so we shout them lunch, and I say, we're going to shout you lunch today. And I get funny looks. I'm like, why would you shout at me? It's like, I'm going to shout you. I'm going to buy you lunch, right? You know, I have to kind of explain the colloquialism of what that all means, which is kind of funny and insightful, I guess, for folks to know that, you know, I'm now, you know, very happily married to my for 14 years to my fifth generation American husband. And it's some insight into some of the conversations that he and I have had in the past. But anyway, I digress. So the cultural challenge was a lot more difficult coming to the States. And I'm not really quite sure why. I think the feeling of being part of something like the collectivism that is Asia compared to the individualism that is the United States was something that I very much struggled with. Everybody in Asia that I met was very much, come with us, come and join us, come out for a dinner, you know, come out for drinks. Like it was just part of our day. Whereas in the United States, everybody tended to kind of disappear back to their homes. And so the single girl that moved here, it was very lonely, particularly in comparative to the collectivist nature of the culture in Hong Kong. But anyway, I'm, you know, well and truly integrated here now, and that was back in 2011, so 15 years ago. But yeah, what I was getting to around communication, as much as I didn't speak the local language in Hong Kong, there was this collective communication element that was very helpful. I did everything I could to learn as many languages when I was living in Hong Kong. I felt that it was on me, because I'd moved there, to learn as much about their culture. So, you know, I'd go to China and I'd say "谢谢," you know, which is thank you, obviously, in Mandarin, and "ngoi sai" for Cantonese, to say thank you very much. And "arigato gozaimasu" when I was in Japan. And I struggled a lot with the Korean language. I'm sorry for the Koreans out there, but I just could not. I don't know. I struggled with that. But I did make as much of an effort as I could to communicate without learning full language scripts, but enough to at least be polite in Asia. But moving to the States, yeah, I felt like there was much more of a language barrier here and a communication barrier here than what I'd experienced in Hong Kong, which I found really curious personally.
But it strikes me that you can never theorize around those or hypothesize around those unless you've done the travel and the living in different places like you have done. I always thought that when I traveled, Jojo, that I needed to know thank you. What was it? There was about 5 different words. And one of them was "excuse me," because each time, like if you knocked your bag or if you like knocked someone accidentally, I'd always be like, "Oh, excuse me," in English. And then I'd be like, that's not helpful.
It's so true, Sam. Right. You know, I think I would just use, like, if that happened to me in China, I would just say "谢谢." And I think it's like, it's a hello, it's an I'm sorry, it's a please forgive me, you know, I have no idea what I'm doing.
Especially the latter. I have no idea what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Oh, Jojo, I love hearing that. That is.
I remember being in Japan, Sam. We were running an orientation program, and I'd learned in high school. Actually, I learned a little bit of Japanese, so I learned to count from 1 to 10. So I would tell my participants in Japan that they had 5 more minutes to complete a task. And I would say, oh, is it ichi, ni, san, shi, go is 5. So I would say, go minutes. Go, as if to say, 5 more minutes you've got to complete this exercise. And then the most delightful Japanese would write in my evaluations, Joanne should not try and speak Japanese. That's humility. But another story in Japan, I was talking to some colleagues the other day about Japan. I was in Japan, and well, I was actually in Hong Kong, and it was around about 2006, I want to say. Folks might remember there was a huge earthquake in Tokyo, and I'd heard about the earthquake, and I cared about, obviously, my colleagues in Tokyo, and I wanted to make sure that they were okay. So I rang my business partner in Tokyo. Her name was Takako, and I rang her on a cell phone, and she answered, and I said, Takako-san, are you okay? I'm hearing that there's earthquakes in Tokyo. I just want to make sure you're okay. And she said something along the lines of, "Oh, Joanne," she said, the walls are moving around me like, um, paper, and I'm safe. I'm standing under a door frame. But Joanne, do you mind if I call you back? Go, go do what you have to do. But it was just so polite, and just so respectful.
In chaos.
In the middle of chaos, of this chaos that she was in the middle of this earthquake.
God, there's so much to appreciate.
She ended up so much to appreciate about people, right, and about communication. She ended up walking home 6 hours, I think, that night because the whole Tokyo subway was closed down, and thankfully she was fine. But these are all of the stories that we're talking about, and you're in my relationship as well. So it's the people that impact our lives, and for good, for bad, or indifferent. And I just on my tombstone, I think will be this, impact is everything, because I think that people just don't pay enough attention to the potential impact that they might have on others. And by the way, Sam, I'm not saying I'm perfect under any way, shape, or form, but I do try. And I think if we all had a little bit more awareness and maybe tried a little bit harder to understand the impact that we have on others, that we would all communicate better, and we would ultimately have better human relationships at the end of the day.
Well said, Jojo. And tell me, do you want to talk a little bit about what you learnt through that process of losing 5 people in too short a time, and or a bit more about impact? Jojo, do you want to talk about even I would actually love to hear about some of the surprises you might have had because of your impact on others, to have seen some little twinkling comments that people might have said. I know that you're a very humble person, so it's probably hard to extract this from you. But tell me a little bit more about either what you learnt through the grieving process, and or a bit more about impact.
I think I get emotional when I think about some of this stuff, Sam, because it's, we, like I said, we all try to have the most positive impact, and sometimes I don't think we realize some of the impact that we have on others, for good, for bad, or indifferent. But I like to focus on the positive. So I went through quite a tumultuous time most recently in my current role. It was a change in leadership, and it was hard. And I walked into work one day, and one of my clients, so to speak, right, one of the leaders that I work most directly with, had a gift for me. And she had been at a local fair of some description, and that someone there had been selling some organic, natural, like skincare products, right, exfoliant products or something, like, and clay masks or whatever for the face. And I walked into work, and this client person was walking towards me with like a little gift bag, And she said, I know you've been through it, and a beautiful card as well. And it was, I know you've been through some challenging times lately. I was thinking about you and thought you might like this to pamper yourself and make yourself feel better. And I'm like, wow, why was this person thinking about me on the weekend? Right? You know, I mean, we'd had a couple of conversations, but it wasn't, you know, it wasn't a long-term relationship. I'd only met this person a few months before, but clearly I'd have had enough positive impact on her for her to be thinking of me over the weekend and decide to do something nice for me to make my life easier.
Yeah.
And that meant the world to me, you know. And then I thought back on some of the conversations that I had had with her and maybe some of the coaching kind of comments that I had made. And clearly I'd made a difference. And that just meant the absolute world to me, that I had had that positive impact on another human being in my life. So that was pretty special. I think sometimes people surprise us with that, you know, beautiful gifts, or, you know, I know, Sam, you're one to be sending little cards or little gifts, or that, you know, and it's just really nice to get them in the mail and go, oh man, that's, you know, thank you. That's so sweet.
Being thought of.
You exactly, right? In the most positive of ways. So with that, you know, I could definitely take a leaf out of your book, right, and start sending a few more little thank you notes, or I'm thinking of you in a really nice way, or a little gift or whatever. You know, I try to, but I probably could take a leaf out of this person and your book as it relates to that.
We can always grow, and I know how much you care from the WhatsApp messages that I get from you.
Yeah, that's true. The little ad hoc ones that come through from time to time. But there's something special about receiving a gift or something physical in the mail, you know, whether it's a little card or,
yeah,
you know, I know you've made me some things in the past and sent
well,
them
I had
through, and,
I had
you know.
trouble the other day, Jojo, because I wanted to send something to a friend in South Africa, and she doesn't have postage. There's not at all any post. And as much as I've heard of different, you know, goings on in South Africa, just that basic delivery of something that I might want, I hadn't thought about that not being available in a place like that. So that's being held in Australia, waiting for her to come and visit.
Right. And it'll happen, I'm sure. I think that, you know, that saying, what are we in life if not the impact we have on others, that I created for my book, and I know we've talked about today. I wonder, the one thing that I took out of those 5 people passing away, Sandra being one of them, was, Joanne, did I really appreciate them while they were in my life as much as I think I wanted them to know? And I think in some instances, yes. But I probably could have done more of that as well. But on the whole, I'm very happy in terms of how I've left, or they left, literally, the relationship. But I always think that there is something more that we could do, just to thank the people around us for being in our lives, because their presence is a gift. And you know what? On the other side of things, if there are people in our lives that are maybe not as positively impactful for us, to do the right thing by them and us, to create appropriate boundaries of psychological safety between us and them, in the most respectful possible way that we can. And one of those 5 people that passed away, I had created that healthy boundary with for a long time, and hearing about their death was really quite significant, obviously. And while I did have some appreciation for them being in my life at certain times, there was a point where I had to create a healthy boundary to go, you know what? No, I can't have you in my life anymore. It doesn't mean that they had less or more impact on me when they passed away, but even the people that might have a negative impact on our lives and we're able to create those healthy boundaries around, they've still been in our lives for a reason. You know, the old adage of a reason, season, or a lifetime. There's still elements of my relationship with that person that I can still be very thankful for in hindsight. And their death was still a significant death. It just wasn't, you know, all of the most positive of relationships for what it could have, or possibly what it could have ultimately been had I been different. I'm talking more specifically about my father right now, my biological father. But yeah, still some very happy memories there, but a lot of very challenging ones as well. So, you know, your parents are your parents. I do wonder, you know, I know that there's a lot of spiritual, very different spiritual beliefs out there, particularly as it can be related to the relationships that we have with our significant others, in particularly our parents. And I still think that, you know, in some way, shape, or form, I had something that I needed to learn from the relationship with my father. It's just one of those things, I guess. Yeah.
Jojo, you are so gracious. I appreciate you talking about that. And one of the things that came to mind was when friends recently have been going through hard times, I've often said, number one, it is enough for you to be on this planet. And sometimes I think we can forget that. I sort of have this sense these days that people are actually just articulating more quickly or more often the thoughts in their head of appreciation and love for others. It could just be the people that I'm around, but I do think there's increasing frequency, Jojo.
That could be it, Sam, too. I mean, there's a common denominator here.
Is there anything that we haven't covered that you would like to cover?
No, Sam, I'm just so proud of you and, you know, all of these amazing Natural Genius podcasts that you have been putting together with such professionalism and humility and thoughtfulness. You know, every single one of them I listen to is unique because, you know, you're unique and you bring out some of the most amazing elements of uniqueness and, might I say, natural genius in other people.
Natural genius. You may.
Like such a brilliant term of phrase. I love it. That, you know, I really believe that everybody has some element of natural genius in them, and what a gift you are in enabling that to come out on such a wonderful podcast series. So cheers to you. I want to make sure that we acknowledge that as well, because in my mind, you are probably one of the most natural geniuses in my life that I've ever experienced. So high five, my friend. You know, very excited for you. And, you know, I hope that everybody listening is aware of the fact that, you know, whether they've been able to tap into it yet or not, it's there. It's there, and just to keep being curious. You know, hindsight, as I say, is the perfect science, but I do find that all of the positive, negative, challenging, wonderful, amazing, whatever experiences that I've had in my life have ultimately all happened for a reason and have gotten me to where I am right now. And I'm thankful for that every day, even the more challenging ones. And I know it's cliche to kind of say, well, bad things happen to good people, or bad things might happen for a reason. I really think that they do. They're just tougher to deal with when we're going through them. But when we do get through them, better things are on the horizon. We're arguably better people, better humans for them, and better humans for other people for them. So. Thank you, Sam.
I'm in awe, and I love that your natural genius, just some of it, is encapsulated. There's way more that we could have gotten into. Everyone has a lot of facets to them, and it's so lovely to honour
all diamonds.
That.
Diamonds in the rough.
Thanks, Jojo.
Thank you, Sam.
Thanks for listening to the Natural Genius podcast. Please share this with anyone who came to mind, and visit us at naturalgenius.com.au. Thanks so much.